young people causing mayhem in Chicago. And no one, that's no one, seems to have a solution for these problems, spreading across America to every major urban city. If the Nation of Islam had not been undermined by the United States government, if they would have been able to prosper, they know how to respond to issues like what happened last week in Chicago. And Fred Hampton, leader of the new Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, based in Chicago, had he not been assassinated by J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, his organization of young people would have known how to respond. Hey, I'm back. I've been going for a minute. There's been so much going on in the news. I've been kind of busy the last 2 weeks, so I haven't put up any content, but I've got a lot of content coming up the next couple of days, almost every day. So if you're new to my channel, be sure to click the subscribe button so you can get notifications for when I'm uploading episodes, and also go to that like button as well. So I'm going to talk about some things in the news that probably you didn't hear about, but I want to go over some of the other stories that have been happening in the news as well, just to mention them because, as I said, I've been away for 2 weeks. So we all know about, unfortunately, the shooting in Kansas City with the young man Ralph Yari, who knocked on the wrong door. Finally, thanks to support from the community coming out and picketing and protesting outside of the, let's say, the perpetrator's house, he's been arrested, and that's a story I'm sure that everybody knows about, everybody's keeping up with. Of course, 2 weeks before that, and I hadn't done any podcasts in a while, we had the situation in Tennessee with the two lawmakers, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, who were expelled. Thank God they got their seats back. The people who elected them from their community had every right to voice their concerns. And of course, based on Tennessee law, the people were able, the city council and those to empower them to go back and take their seats. And we're glad to see that happen. But I wanted to address and touch on some things that you may or may not have heard about, because there was so much other news going on. And that's what happened in Chicago last weekend. Yes, last weekend in Chicago, for 3 straight days, young people were running wild. The main shopping area in downtown Chicago is by the Loop. I guess there were social media posts that young people put out, and they went downtown and tore the city up. It was terrible. And unfortunately, the Chicago police just stood by and really didn't do anything. Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, who was the Black woman mayor, was defeated in an election, and there were 2 candidates that were leading to win the election. One was a gentleman who was very strong pro-police. He was a Democrat, and the other person was a Democrat as well, someone that came out of the education system in Chicago as a teacher, as an educator, and was more community-based. And he, I guess some people thought it was an upset, he won the election because apparently people came out in support of him in bigger numbers than what the pollsters were saying. So he's got a tough job ahead of him. But let's look at some of this footage about what was happening in Chicago last week and why I'm saying, are these young people out of control? So let's look.
The 15th Ward's Lopez and other officials say that since police lacked enough manpower to arrest organizers of the violence last weekend, there are now posts such as this on social media boasting that Part 2 will convene this Saturday at various points downtown. The downtown Second Ward's Brian Hopkins notes that tens of thousands of jobs are at stake in hotels, restaurants, and entertainment venues, many of whose patrons are already reluctant to come downtown, especially in the evening. He wants police and State's Attorney Kim Foxx to use every tool they have.
The Walgreens at one point on State and Madison, we know about the injuries. We know at least 4 shots fired incidents resulted in 2 gunshot victims, one age 16 and one age 17. A lot of armed robberies, a lot of strong armed robberies, and several police officers injured, by the way.
So yes, you can see this was really bad. And the woman that was being attacked here was a white female who was with her Black boyfriend. They were both visiting Chicago, and they were just attacked and savagely, accosted and beat.
Lenora Dennis, the woman who came to their aid, say that several Chicago police officers passed by but did not intervene.
Cops drove right by it. Act like they didn't see anything.
I literally went out into the street and stopped and held my hands up to a police car and asked them to stop and motioned them over to what was going on. And they just cut a path around me and just kept going.
She was eventually able to get the couple into her car. Then she drove them to the police station.
Got told by the desk sergeant that this was going to happen. It was going to keep happening because Brandon Johnson got elected. That floored me.
An ambulance then took them to the hospital, but the couple was without their phones, wallets, and shoes, which had all been stolen during the attack.
I told the couple that I was going to go home to find them some shoes so that they wouldn't be barefoot for the rest of the night.
Her name is Lenora.
Wow. She gave us shoes, took us home, took us to the hospital.
Her husband as well.
Thank you.
It was just terrible. But I'm going somewhere with this, so let's hear what some black men have to say about this. But
play the video. It's this is a woman they're doing this to. This is we just can't sit back and tolerate this.
of course, there's so many people had commentary, but I want to go to Boyce Watkins, who I've done some podcasts about. Sometimes I don't agree with him, but I agree with him this time. And let's hear what Dr. Boyce Watkins had to say about what happened in Chicago last weekend.
Chaos is I see a community that doesn't have fathers. I see a fatherless community when I look at this. We have an element of the black community where if we don't kind of intervene in some meaningful way and start really talking about what's really going on in the black community and stop pretending like this is not happening, we're going to continue to have significant problems in our community. You have pretty much a lost generation or two, and makes a baby with a woman has at least a 70% chance of staying with that woman after the child is born. If we did that, where that child has at least a 70-80% chance of having a mother and a father that is there for him, cares for him, guides him, tells him what to do, that if we solve that problem, we would literally have a much better community. When they broke down your families, they broke you down, period. They destroyed you, man. You really think a teenage boy is gonna be able to be controlled only by his mama? You think my mama, there's no way on earth my mama could have controlled me when I was 17 years old. It took two parents working hard, working overtime to control me. I was an energetic teenager. I got into stuff. So this idea that somehow you think, I know black women, I know y'all strong, and I know our women are just the strongest and the best and everything else. But come on, man. This whole chaos, all this chaos, that's broken families. That's what that is. Think about this. How many of you had the fortune of having two strong parents in the house? Or at least one good parent that taught you, that gave you some home training. What would have happened if your parents were watching the news and they saw you in a crowd where a white lady got beat up? What would your parents do? What would happen? Would they just ignore it? Would they, or if you were out at 1 o'clock in the morning, on a Tuesday, and people were getting beat up downtown and you were part of the crowd, what would your parents do?
Wow. Boyce Watkins, this time you're 100% right. I got to agree with you 1,000%. 1,000%. We're approaching something where some of these situations are irreversible. And you might say, well, why do you say irreversible? It's because of where we're at. We don't have anybody addressing these issues. We don't have any politicians talking about it. Of course, Fox News is going to show it. No leaders in whether it's our community or national leaders, local leaders, no one seems to have any solutions or even wants to come up with any solutions. And I dare say that many years ago, where I'm going with this, you did have people speaking out about it. You had organizations speaking out about it. You had, even going back some 40 plus years ago, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a senator from New York. And he talked about how illegitimacy growing in the black community was going to be a danger in the future if, in fact, there were not men in the homes, if there were too many single women head of households, what some of the dangers could be if this began to perpetuate itself generation after generation. And we're starting to see that. And also, Dr. Bill Cosby, some people are going to have a problem, but Dr. Cosby wrote a book and he talked about this, Come On My People, and he really addressed, the community with some of these issues. And unfortunately, a lot of people, just like they attacked Daniel Patrick Moynihan, they went after Dr. Cosby. But it's very difficult for a single parent, male or female, to try to raise children, and especially boys when they get to a certain age where they become rebellious. And for single mothers, it's even worse, especially with the pressures that are in communities today, not just social media, but it's in the music. You have gangs in the school, gangs in the neighborhood, all kinds of issues. I want you to hear something from this mother in Baltimore after a wave of shootings and things that affected Baltimore, Maryland, what she did, but I want to comment on her statement.
People were shot in 3 different shootings. One of the victims died. 4 of those people were hurt in a single shooting along North Charles Street in North Baltimore today. Over the weekend, 4 young people ages 12 to 18 were shot. The 12-year-old victim, identified as Jalen Richards, died. And now we're hearing from one mother who says she pulled her son, who knew Jalen, out of the city to try to save his life.
People are lying to themselves, and it's very possible. I just told you my son had an Uzi. I'm not going to lie to the public. This is a crisis right now.
So my question is, where's his father? Where's, I don't know, your husband, baby daddy, whatever? How did it get to the point, miss, that he has a Uzi in the house? Like, I'm sure things progressed. And this is what I'm talking about. I just have to say it. We've had 30 plus years, over 40 years now, of black single mothers trying to raise these boys. And the reality is, all we have to do is look and we have the answer. They can't do it. They can't. And this is not a shot at anyone who is a single parent for whatever issues, and you have raised your children and they went on to be successful in life, productive members of society. Maybe they became a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief. Maybe they're a successful entrepreneur. Maybe they're like Dr. Ben Carson, became a brain surgeon, came from a single parent household. I'm not attacking single parent households. I'm not attacking or saying anything about someone who's in the circumstances of raising their child or children on their own. I'm talking about a perpetual situation that we're in, because in a lot of these homes, the ones where some of the boys are coming from, as Dr. Boyce Watkins says, there's no black father in the home. And we have to stop burying our head in the sand. This, as I said, going on 34 years, I'm a boss chick. I don't need a man. These things are destroying the community, these type of attitudes. Let's listen to what this young lady has to say, and you'll see why I'm saying that.
I only want you for the money and the clothes and for the bills. That's it. If you ain't getting my hair done, if you ain't getting my nails done, if you ain't doing nothing for me, then I don't need you here. It's not 50-50. It's not 80-20. It's 100% to 0.
I've already spoken.
So isn't that terrible? But that's a prime example of what I'm talking about. And you can hear people in the community who want to be honest, and they will say what the problem is, but they don't have a megaphone. They don't have a voice. They don't have a TV show. They don't have, not that newspapers or magazines matter that much anymore. They don't even have the opportunity to write to a publication and hope in the editorial that they could get it published so people can begin this discussion. But you're seeing at least black YouTubers, black men starting to speak out about this issue.
Play the video. It's this is a woman they're doing this to. This is we just can't sit back and tolerate this. Without fathers, without intact families, that's who can get radicalized. When all of the messaging from social media and all the media elites are sitting on platforms over social media, on corporate media platforms, telling young black kids, you're a victim.
I'm glad to be able to be a podcaster and speak about this. So now I want to go to a interview done on Sirius XM Radio, which you know I listen to, and I've been critical of the Urban channel on Sirius XM, Sirius Urban View. And this is one of their hosts who had a very renowned African-American educator, someone who has written over 40 books. He goes around the country teaching educators all over this country how to educate black boys. And in this brief interview, you'll hear him talk about data and stats and what the problems are. And then I'll come right back.
Probably, the person that helped shape my education through my father. He has more than 40 books, most of them on how to raise black boys and educate black boys, which I think is so important. He is the founder of African American Images as well. Let me welcome to the show for the first time, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. Hi.
How you doing, Karen? The hardest working sister in radio.
Yeah, the hottest show in the galaxy, but all right, we could be all of those things. How are you, sir?
Doing real well. Good to see you. Good seeing you, Dr. Mitchell.
So lovely to meet you. You were doing this work before it was popular, and you're still doing it. What has been the most disappointing over the last 30 plus years, as long as I've known you, because you were doing it before then, in terms of either the devolvement or the lack of leading into real education? What has been the most disappointing for you?
Most rewarding.
Now that's an easy question. That's an easy question.
That would be easy.
Easier than that.
I think the most disappointing is that in 1920, 90% of our youth had their fathers in the home. In 1960, it was 80%. But in 2023, it's only 28%. So fatherlessness is driving a lot of the problems as it relates to the dropout rate, incarceration, crime, drug addiction. The role of the father needs to be emphasized more.
Study that says that black fathers are way more involved in the lives of their children, whether they're married or not. And marriage is a construct just like race is, in my opinion, because I don't know if Adam and Eve were married before the court of law. But that's neither here nor there. You're talking about...
So very negatively, what did this woman host do? She cut him off. And she says, no, that's not the problem, because black men could still be engaged. And so what, the households are not together, and the marriage rate went from in the 90s down to, now 70-80% of the children being born out of wedlock. No, that's the problem. And we cannot bury our head in the sand and admit that this does not affect things, especially when we have women leading this charge and saying, no, everything is fine. It's not fine, because all we have to do is look at the results. And you know what? We've got some trouble. And reminds me of a movie I saw many years ago, more than many years ago. It was with Robert Preston. It was a musical. It was a play on Broadway and then became a hit film. It was The Music Man, and it was about corruption coming to a city because things were happening and the young people were getting out of control. And this man was going to then provide something for the young people to do, where they would join a band and they would have instruments to play. But he was really a con man. But there's a part in the movie where he's getting the townspeople riled up because the young men are hanging out at the pool hall. And he says, there's trouble right here in River City. And it starts with a capital P, and that stands for pool.
Right here in River City. With a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. We've surely got trouble. Right here in River City.
We've got trouble, but it's not just in Chicago. It's not just in Baltimore. It's not just in Washington, D.C. It's not just in Philadelphia. Oh, it's everywhere. Matter of fact, in Alabama last weekend, you know, there was a Sweet 16 party, and unfortunately, several young people, very innocent, many of them as young as 12, 13 years old, were killed. Thank God they apprehended, I understand as late as today, the 6th individual involved in that shooting, though they don't know the motive yet. But when you can't have a Sweet 16 party, you can't go to a memorial service or a funeral service, when you can't have birthday parties, when you can't have football games, basketball games, whether it's a high school basketball game or a community basketball game, when you can't have a Martin Luther King Day parade, there was one here in Florida, and there was a young lady who was killed who wanted to be a doctor. When you have these things happen, you can't be normalized to them. And though we know in greater society we have shootings happening all the time of all types. We had a young lady killed because she was backing out of someone's driveway because she pulled into the wrong address. I mean, these things are affecting our whole country. But in terms of the Black community, they need to be addressed differently. And that's why I wanted to put this out here tonight, because there's been so many other stories in the news lately, and you may not have seen what happened in Chicago. And you know I commented on what happened in Miami during spring break this year. So don't know what your feelings are. I'd like to hear your comments below. If you can feel free to mention how you feel about this issue. But it's one that needs to be addressed. It's one that we need some leadership to come up with some solutions for, because as Dr. Boyce Watkins says, as I agree with him this time, we are approaching this problem not only by not acknowledging it, that it is a problem, but we're getting to the point where things may be irreversible in terms of trying to make change. All right, I hope you enjoyed this brief conversation. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe.